Welcome back to the show. Her Justice is a not-for-profit organization providing free legal help to low-income women living in New York City in an effort to address individual and systemic legal barriers. Now, this month is Child Support Awareness Month, and Her Justice is committed to ensuring justice for parents navigating this overburdened system. And joining us now is the Director of Policy at Her Justice, Rachel Braunstein, and we thank you so much for being with us, Rachel.
Thank you for having me, Daren.
Rachel, as we talk about this month, I'll start first and foremost talking about Child Support Awareness Month. There are many women across America that are really dealing with the issue of trying to get child support, particularly in low-income communities. So give us a little bit about what you're finding when it comes to child support.
Sure. So Her Justice has been working in the area of family law and divorce and immigration for almost 30 years. Child support is a key issue for us. We provide extensive representation, lawyers in court, for women who need to go to family court in New York for child support. What we've learned from 30 years of doing this work is that that process is hard. It is lengthy. It is often confusing. The statistics show that statewide in New York, only about 10% of parents in the child support courts, in family court, have lawyers. So what you have is parents facing a very complex system, which again often takes months, if not years, to get child support. And we provide the lawyers that we can through our pro bono model, where we have lawyers at the major law firms in the city providing free representation, but we're not able to address the full scope of need in New York City. And many other organizations like ours aren't either. So we have studied the issue. In addition to representing folks in child support, we embarked on a 2-year court watch project back in 2017, where we observed almost 800 court appearances in the family courts relating to child support to look at the problem from another angle. What's going on in these cases and what can we do about it?
And so when we look at these cases, let's talk about some of the barriers. What are some of the barriers that we're seeing in these cases?
So let me first say that child support is absolutely critical. As you point out, it's absolutely critical income for single parents. And there are many single parents in New York, of course, and nationwide. The vast majority of single parents are mothers. Her Justice represents women, and many of our own clients are mothers. So you've got a critical source of income for families in child support, but you've got a system that makes it really hard to get that child support. And this is for all families, right? Her Justice works on behalf of women, but we're very interested in and committed to ensuring that the civil justice system, including child support, works for all families. So barriers. It is very complex to get child support in the New York family courts. That is because a system by lawyers makes it hard to understand what is necessary to provide to the court so that you can get the help you need. It requires financial literacy, which is an issue that we see among many low-income and poor folks. That is that remains a problem. Child support requires parents to prove their income, and this can be hard for some people. And navigating the system without a lawyer is not so easy. Add to that the rampant delays that we see in the family courts to get child support. So as I mentioned, this court watch project that we conducted, we saw that on average, the court appearances lasted about 11 minutes. And more than half of those appearances were adjourned or postponed down the road. So you've got short court appearances and a lengthy overall case in court, months, if not years. And so your critical financial relief in child support is delayed. And that is problematic for people raising children on their own. Child support for our clients is the critical bridge to putting food on the table, paying rent. For our clients who are survivors or victims of domestic violence, child support provides that critical financial stability so that they can remain free from an abusive relationship. So a combination of barriers plus the critical nature of the child support for a family has made it a key issue for her justice in our policy and advocacy work.
So when we talk about policy and advocacy, obviously there are a lot of things that you're fighting for, would like to see. I want to talk about what could make the system better in terms of helping these women who really have this is their sole, sometimes it's their sole source of income, or that additional support that's actually needed to help their family make it through.
That's right. So one of the things we've been really interested in, and in fact wrote legislation around, is expanding the menu of options for parents in New York to get child support. As I alluded to, child support is almost exclusively handled under the current practice and protocol and laws in family court. So whether you have a complex situation of income between the parents or a very straightforward one, two W-2 wage earners, you have to file a petition in family court and go through a lengthy process, which is essentially litigation, a court case. That is appropriate for some people who need the resources of the courts and the attentions of judges and magistrates, but not every family needs to go through litigation like that to get child support. Some families agree on what income is available to support their children. Again, if you have two parents who earn W-2 reportable wages, there's no dispute, and the state law provides a calculation or a formula for how to determine child support. That family doesn't need to toil away for months in court. And so what the subject of legislation, which we were proud to draft and have introduced by Bronx Assembly Member Reyes and Brooklyn Senator Persaud this past winter, would create an administrative pathway, so outside of the courts, through the state child support agencies, for families who agree on child support and the income available for children and don't need to be in court. They would be able to reach agreement in an administrative conference, again, facilitated by a child support agency, get that order then transmitted to court, signed off on by a court, and have the weight of a court order, right? So if one parent then doesn't pay in the future, the recipient parent could enforce that order like you would out of any family court case. And it would be a much more expeditious process. It would be a fair process for families who don't have the days to take off of work to go to court, or the extra money to incur child care costs if you go to court month after month after month in a regular court case. So this would add to the menu of options for families to get fair, equitable, expeditious child support. And many other states have this model. About half of the states in the country have a model like this. And we are very much hoping that New York would do this as well.
Well, when we talk about New York, give us New York as an example. How are we faring compared to other states when it comes to this particular issue?
Well, I think New York has such a robust and strong court system. New York puts a lot of our civil justice needs in the hands of our courts. For example, child support, you must go to court. We have a lot of custody litigation, other matters like that, orders of protection and domestic violence, that her justice also works in those areas. So New York is a very sort of court-heavy state, which is, again, very appropriate for many families. But I think that New York has a lot of opportunity to follow the model of some other states and do better. I point out here that the pandemic was very unfriendly to the New York court system, especially the family courts. The crisis that resulted when the public health situation evolved, which of course initially required that courts be closed, right? It wasn't safe for people to go to court, but over time, it became really important for families like her justice clients and others living in poverty in the state to access the courts, and they couldn't The courts weren't able to quickly get up and running. And that is a major crisis. And we see that these sort of unmodernized courts, family courts in particular, New York, do all their business in person. E-filing or electronic filing of papers was impossible in family court before the pandemic, right? So it wasn't even possible for someone to submit a form through their computer. They had to go to court, to wait online for hours in many cases to submit an initial paper in a case. That's really problematic when the courts are serving hundreds of thousands of people. And so we've seen other states really pivot in the wake of the pandemic and innovate. For example, Massachusetts innovated in child support in particular and stood up a program like the sort that we've proposed in our legislation so that undisputed child support can be handled outside of the courts. They did that to address pandemic backlog in their family courts. And we're really hoping that New York, when faced with a crisis of backlog in the courts and many people who need help, would innovate similarly.
Yeah. When I talk about the backlog, we've talked about this on the show. We've had legal analysts who've come on and said, when we look at what goes on in the court system, it can take months and now sometimes even an extra year because of the cases due to COVID, then the courts being shut. For you, boots on the ground, what are you seeing by way of time frame of delay in terms of getting service to your clients? Because sometimes a court action is the best possible action for your client, but if you can't get into the courtroom, that also further exacerbates their issue.
Absolutely right. And we see even longer delays than we had seen and studied prior to the pandemic. So there were categories of cases in family court that were unavailable, that folks couldn't access. So you couldn't file, for example, for child support in the early months of the pandemic. The courts were not accepting child support petitions in New York City in particular, where a huge volume of child support is done for the state, as you can imagine. So full closure over time, that petitioning became available. But then for folks who were able to navigate a new virtual appearance world, right? Because the courts then were able to make remote or virtual appearances available in some of the family court cases that we handle. Then you would get a short appearance and you would get your next court date 4, 5, 6 months, if a year down the road. Now, so the court is doing its best to triage the need. The need is enormous. It has always been enormous for family court help. But the need plus the backlog, I understand that the burden on the court is significant. So they're doing their best to triage, but our own lawyers are seeing adjournments or postponements of cases that are way outside of even what we saw before the pandemic, which frankly was problematic. I mean, we've studied this issue for years pre-pandemic because it was invisible, I think, to a lot of policymakers, how long it took to navigate the family courts, and it was so critically important to change. So it has really gotten to be a huge crisis.
So I want to take a moment to talk about the correlation. When we talk about child support, we also talk about child poverty.
Mhm.
And many people won't put that correlation together, child support and child poverty, but you do. Give us a little bit of filling in that blank, because I don't think many people, even yours truly, fully understands the magnitude of when we talk about child support and how that could potentially lead to child poverty.
I'm so glad you raised that point, because a lot of the advocacy work we've done around child support is simply to raise awareness of the connection between child support and childhood poverty. The federal child support program was started in 1975 to address childhood poverty. It provides lots of statistics over the years about the critical nature of child support for families. Some families, especially those living in deep poverty, rely on child support for half of their income. So it is an absolute necessity for families. And the number of families nationwide involved in the child support program, so families seeking orders of child support or seeking enforcement of orders of child support, is in the many millions, 11 plus million. So it's a huge issue for families to get child support. I will say, we always look at the whole picture, and focusing on child support as an issue of childhood poverty also means that we take great care and responsibility in what that means for families involved in the child support, like parents involved in the child support system. So there has been really important attention paid to the consequences of child support enforcement for low-income fathers, especially fathers of color, and what the burden of child support debt means in their lives. That research is really important. It really helps us understand, I think, as a society, what it looks like, given the importance of child support in children's lives, what it looks like for families to be involved with the child support system. A lot of the work Her Justice is doing is trying to shed light on the corollary experience for mothers in the child support system, mostly mothers living in poverty, mostly mothers of color like our clients. And what does it look like for them to pursue, in New York, for example, a court case for years on end to get basic needs for their children met? And the research is unequivocal that money for children means better outcomes, health outcomes, educational outcomes, you name it. There's no question about that. So what I think we need to do, and what Her Justice has been working towards, is doing better by families so that families can more efficiently, effectively, and equitably get the support that their children need.
So for the future, what do you have your eyes on? What are you looking at in terms of really advocacy? And how can the public play a part in really supporting your work?
Well, I stress this point about a menu of options for folks who are living in poverty. We have a civil justice system and a legal system in general that is navigated more easily if you have resources. But if you don't have resources, you have fewer doors to walk through to get the help you need. And you can't get the help you need other than walking through those doors. We're really interested in improving the menu of options for people who don't have money to afford a lawyer, or who aren't lucky enough to get one of our wonderful pro bono lawyers through the Her Justice program, to be able to resolve their disputes in a more efficient and equitable way. So this child support legislation that I referred to, that we were so proud and excited to build momentum around this past New York State legislative session, we're really excited about pushing that forward. We are really interested in bringing to light what it looks like for all of our clients, including our clients who are immigrants and undocumented and waiting for the status that they need to stabilize their families, to engage with the system, and for the system to be able to respond more fairly to the individuals who depend on it.
Yeah. Well, walk me through a little bit as we wind down a little bit about where we are in terms of government support. I know you talked about the bill with Assemblymember Reyes and Councilperson Prasad. Talk to me a little bit about buy-in from government, because this is a weighty issue, and sometimes you can run into some resistance with government. What's it been like for you as you begin to make your case and let people know about the issue of child support?
I have to say, we've been really pleased with the amount of support that we've built within government. Our state elected officials, including Assemblymember Reyes, Senator Prasad, and many of their colleagues, were enthusiastic about this idea. In fact, one of the legislative caucuses, the Black, Hispanic, Puerto Rican, and Asian caucus, adopted this legislative proposal as one of their People's Budget 2022 priorities, which was a strong show of support. And we've built support in city government to act as a sort of companion to the state legislators who would pass the law, because it is a state level proposal. City government also is really interested in and I say in particular city council, really interested in this as an innovative approach to solving this problem of getting fair child support. And within agencies, the Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance at the state level, which would implement the pilot that we propose in this legislation for an administrative conference process, really enthusiastic about it, and has much experience in thinking about this kind of a pilot, and we relied on their expertise. So I have to say, we found the partnership as advocates on our end with government, both elected officials and state agency folks, really inspiring. I think it takes that kind of multifaceted approach, and I know that a lot in government are looking for a solution to the family court crisis that we find ourselves in post-pandemic, that has existed for years but has shown its ugly face recently. And so I think folks were excited about this as a potential to start chipping away and making change.
So for people who want to get in contact with you and stay connected and possibly assist the work that you do, how do they go about doing that?
I would love for people to look at our website, herjustice.org. We have a policy page. We have a get involved page. There are folks who can volunteer in all kinds of ways. Of course, the lawyers out there can get interested in our work as lawyers representing individuals. But as we sort of reinvigorate our campaign around this issue in the coming session, would love for folks to check out the webpage and see what opportunities there are to write to your elected officials and say that the time is now for change.
Rachel Braunstein, thank you so much for the information that you provided, much needed, and much information with regards to child support awareness, things that we definitely need to know. Thank you so much for joining us.